All right, let's get started. My name is Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. Today's webinar is on an introduction to Matrix. And so I want to help you learn how to prioritize your tasks, projects, and emails effectively using Matrix. And what I want to start with is a quote that has inspired me over the past few months, and it's from Tony Robbins, which is productivity is not just about time management, it's about misplaced attention. Now, one of the reasons I want to bring this up is because the vast majority of people who are here today and the people who tend to watch our webinars and use our software, you guys are so ambitious. You have so many things on your plate, right? So many things you could do. So the question is not around what you are spending your time on, but it's about whether or not you're spending your time on the right things. And so when I think about my personal work, there's just, I have the bandwidth to do 5 things, but I have 50 things that I could do. So one of the challenges I face over and over again is how do I ensure that I'm working on the right things, that I'm making the biggest impact given my goals? And so when we talk about Product Matrix, it's really around how do we actually take control of our time and ensure that we're spending our efforts on the things that matter most. So my goals for today, one, help you understand the basics of Matrix, and then understand and apply what's called the Eisenhower Matrix, which is a concept around prioritization and helping us understand what is important and what is urgent. And then walk you through how to prioritize your personal tasks, team tasks, and organizational tasks and goals. And then also basic collaboration features to prioritize team tasks, how to prioritize emails and conversations, and then show you the features that include email reports, restricting projects, seamless reports, and then also showcase your work for performance reviews and so forth. But there's something I want to emphasize, most important of all, is that, the goal of this webinar is not to tell you about all the features of the system, because I don't think that's a good use of time. Instead, I want you to be reminded that 20% of the capabilities will give you 80% of the value. So one of the things I will bring up over and over again is what are the features, what are the capabilities that really matters? And so I hope that when you walk away from this webinar, you'll just be able to focus on the things that matter to you, as opposed to being able to use the software at a complete level. So let's start with sort of what I think are the timeline in general, especially for those who are new to the system. The first is today, the most important thing is to make sure that you have Matrix on all your platforms, be able to create your first project for yourself as well as for your team, and then also start reviewing what's important and what's urgent. And then over the course of the next 5 days or so, maybe what you're able to do is you start reviewing your priorities with your team members, start reprioritizing your personal tasks and goals, and then check in with your manager to ensure alignment. And then over the course of 30 days, you'll be able to reprioritize your personal goals, your team goals, your organizational goals, create a habit out of prioritizing tasks and emails, and then finally eliminate time wasters so that you can focus on what's really important. A quick overview of Matrix. It's a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software all in one. And we help at 3 different levels. And to me, the most important is the individual level. So helping you prioritize your most important tasks and your emails, right? If we can't do that, it doesn't matter what else we can do. So I hope that when you are listening to this webinar and when you're putting this into practice, that you focus on your personal priorities, to make sure that you're in better control of your personal work. But what happens though is that as we help various individuals within your team prioritize your work, we actually bring and surface that together into one centralized place so that you can actually be aligned on those key projects that you're working on. And I'll walk you through some of the scenarios that I think are very important and very, very useful to ensure that your team's on the same page, literally from day one. And then lastly, as you use Matrix more across teams, it creates what's called what I call a single source of truth to help everyone be aligned on the priorities across organization. Imagine, I ask you a simple question. Do you know what your team goals are, right? And the answer might be yes, you do, or no, you don't, or you might have a sense of what it should be or it could be. And then imagine asking the same, your team members the exact same questions. What do they think the team goals are, right? Will they give the same answer as you or something different? But now extend that further across the whole organization. And you can imagine that if you have, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, the answers will start diverging real quickly. So one of the goals of Party Matrix, as you expand the usage of our software, is that it helps the organization stay aligned. And so I think that's the magic of how all of this comes together. A little bit about Party Matrix. I've talked to thousands of customers over the years. We have thousands of paying customers, more than 1 million users. We're modern workplace certified software within the Microsoft ecosystem. We're also the only software that's Microsoft 365 certified for Teams, Outlook, and Web. And so I bring this up because we have quite a bit of experience in terms of dealing or helping customers manage their priorities and emails. And then also, I want you to reach out to us if you have any questions on how to use the software. I've seen pretty much every single imaginable use case of Party Matrix. So that's what we're here for. So I hope that it's helpful. And so if you have questions specifically, you can also bring that up after the webinar. Now let's start with the fundamental concept behind Party Matrix. There's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is that it helps us realize that the things that we do, they're not single dimension, right? Instead, they're multi-dimension. So let me ask you, imagine the simple scenario. I ask you to write down the 15 things you have to do. Take out a piece of paper, write down the 15 things you have to do. So you start at the top, you write them down all the way down to the 15th. Now, my next question is, so what do you work on first? Is it the first thing that came to your mind? Or is it the last thing? Or is it something random in the middle? And so one of the challenges that we all face is that usually the things that's top of mind is not necessarily important. It just happens to be the last thing we thought about, or it's just something that's been bothering us. So instead of having this long list of 15 things, we just ask two simple questions. Is this task important and is it urgent? And so instead of a list, you end up with these 4 quadrants, and that's called the Eisenhower Matrix. So the tasks that are important and urgent, they're high priority. The tasks that are important but not urgent, they're medium priority. The tasks that are urgent but not important, they're actually low priority. And then you shouldn't have anything that's not important and not urgent. And so instead, your quadrant 4 is sort of your catch-all, your bucket of all the things you could do. And then you decide where do they fit within the bigger picture. So you can see now when in the very beginning, when I talk about the misplaced attention that we all have, or at least I have, is that how many times during the day or during the week or during the month do I spend working on things that's in quadrant 1 versus quadrant 2 versus quadrant 3, or things that's not even a priority within the bigger scope of things? And so this is what happens to all of us. And the reason is we love the shiny new things, right? The last email that comes in is the one we want to answer. Or this new thing we just heard about. So let's spend all our time working on that. And this is something that we face as a company too. There's so many features that we could build. There's so many platforms we could develop on. So in some ways, this is a centralized place for everyone to be on the same page. Now, let me ask you something that's actually going to be really interesting. So go ahead and after today's webinar, open up Party Matrix, create your Eisenhower Matrix, and write down the priorities for your work. Okay, so again, I want you to write roughly 15 things that you consider to be things that you could work on. That's your sort of entire spectrum of what you could do. Now write those 15 things down and put it into these various buckets. Now, one challenge I have for you is you cannot have more than a fourth of your task be in quadrant 1. Okay, so you can't have everything be important and urgent, because if you do, then nothing is important and urgent. All you've done is you've just moved from one list to another list. So you can't do that. So take your 15 things, split them up into these various buckets. Now, I want you to ask your manager to do the same on what they consider the priorities for you, and then do a simple exercise, which is to compare notes. And that's where the magic really happens. And it's ironic because, here we are building a software that syncs across all these platforms, that's so comprehensive and all those things. But yet at the same time, you could do this with a piece of paper. right? Just take a piece of paper, draws the quadrants, and write down your notes, and ask everyone at the table to do the same thing and compare notes. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And this single exercise will be the most impactful thing that you could do this week. But the magic happens is that it forces you to prioritize, and it forces you to put it down into something concrete. And I cannot emphasize this enough. What happens is that when I tell you my priorities, and in my mind, I have my set of priorities, right? The problem is everyone else also have their own sense of what the priorities are, but no one forces everyone to put it all down into something tangible. So then when you compare notes, you start to see the discrepancies. And so what's really not so obvious in all of this is that success from using Matrix isn't from necessarily finding out what everyone agrees on. It's discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. So let me say that again in a slightly different way. What happens is that when you go and you do this exercise that I mentioned, you ask your managers to create their 15 priorities for you. You have your 15 priorities for yourself, and you compare notes. Maybe on 14 of those 15 things, you guys agree with each other. Well, guess what? That's not that valuable. But the one thing where you disagree, that's the value of Matrix. So so one of the things that I really like about the quadrant system is it's so hard to actually prioritize, because I have so many things I want to do. I'll tend to bite on more than I can chew, right? And so therefore, that process of prioritization is where all the value add is. Now, a couple of insights I want to share with you, mostly because having managed hundreds of projects, tens of thousands of tasks, and talking to so many customers, there's a lot of recurring themes that I see as having problems that people have. The first is if everything's important, then nothing is important. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of you are likely managers and you're delegating a lot of tasks to people. And this is something that I suffer from as well, which is, this thing is important. We got to do this right now. But then, 5 minutes later, this thing's important. We got to do this right now. But if you do that to every single task, nothing will be done because you're just constantly shifting the attention away. So be very conscious of how you prioritize and how you delegate. So when you delegate to somebody and you say, hey, this is important, then you have to decide if this is important enough to take it to be here, what task are we taking away from quadrant one? So this is an exercise that you do on a routine basis, on a weekly basis when you work with Matrix. The second is important tasks should always have due dates and clear ownership. And I've seen a lot of people go and they'll create tasks and so forth, but they don't set due dates. And they're like, you know what, this is very important, but it's not really due at any point in time, so we'll just put it in there. I actually recommend the opposite. I recommend that you always set due dates on those important tasks. So then it is top of mind for you that you see it coming, and then you can change the due dates. I'm okay with you changing the due dates. You change it as needed, but you set those due dates so then it's on your calendar. It's how can you have something that's important and urgent if you don't have a time set to it, right? The third is don't track everything, track what matters. When I ask you to do those 15 things, don't write down something like check my emails, right? That makes no sense whatsoever because that's something you're going to do anyways. That's not important at all. And it's the same thing when we think about the work that we put into Matrix. If it's something that's sort of meaningless, I wouldn't recommend. Just get it done. Or, I'm sure it's something you're going to do anyways. So track the things that matter. And then when you prioritize emails using our system, I recommend that you prioritize the most important emails, not all emails. I actually had a conversation with a customer where they were trying to manage tens of thousands of emails, and they're like, how can we bring all this into Matrix? And I said, don't do it, because if you do it, all you're doing is you're taking one list from another system and you move it into Matrix, which is another system to manage your task. It doesn't help you get signal from that noise. And then the fifth thing is that Matrix is a communication tool. Earlier, you saw how I said Matrix is a task, email, and project management software. But really, to me, the most important thing about Matrix is a communication tool that helps you communicate your priorities to others and help others communicate their priorities to you. So if you use our system for nothing else but that, you're using it the right way. Now, this last part is something new that I put down recently, but it's a little bit controversial, but it's that concrete, clear, yet wrong priorities are actually better than invisible assumed priorities. Let me explain what that means. When you use Party Matrix, I ask you to write down those 15 things and you put it into the quadrants, right? Now, what happens is that a lot of us have all these priorities that's in the back of our mind. And we said, you know what? I know we have to do this. This is important. But everyone thinks the same thing. And no one bothers to write it down. And guess what? To me, that's actually a really bad thing. It is better for you to write down your priorities. And then when you have a meeting with your manager, your executive, or your direct reports, and you start having disagreements, that means you're using it right. So that's what I want to emphasize. These are some insights that I want you to put into practice as you use our software, and I think it'll help you prioritize your work better as well. Okay, the webinars, when the recorded ones are on our website, and also we have other webinars and different topics and so forth. One of the things I always want to hear from you is what are the things what topics are interesting to you, and those are potential topics for us to have future webinars about. Now with that, let's go ahead and put this into practice. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my application here, and then I'll walk you through Party Matrix and how to actually do these things that I'm telling you. Here I have my Party Matrix open. So on my left-hand side, I have what's called projects. So you can think of projects as being, each of these quadrants that you have that you work with. Here I have a quadrant, a project selected called My Personal Priorities. As you can see, front and center is the Eisenhower Matrix. High priority, medium priority, low priority, and my inbox, which is my catch-all. So when you use Party Matrix, the first project I want you to create is a My Personal Priorities project. These are the things that you're working on. These are the things you think about. So what I like to do typically is I like to add the task in quadrant 4. Why? It's because that's sort of my repository, right? This is where these are all the things I could do. And so, for example, I'll go ahead and say follow up with webinar participants. So that's a task that I got to do. But one of the things that Part Matrix does is it uses what's called natural language. And so when I say due tomorrow, 2 p.m., and I press enter, Part Matrix will actually create the task, but also what it does is it sets the due date for me for tomorrow, 2 p.m., my local time. So no matter what time zone you're in, Part Matrix will process that as well. Now, when I created that task, on the right-hand side, I get what's called item details. This is additional information that I have around the task. Now, let me tell you what are the things that's really important. As you can see here, there's a lot of features, right? I can star a task, I can add icons to a task, I can change ownership, set progress, effort, and so forth. But there's two features that I think are most important, and I recommend that you use, which is due dates that we just talked about earlier. If anything that's important should have due dates. And the second is reminder. So let me explain the difference between due dates and reminders. Imagine if you have a task that's due next week and it's going to take you 3 days to work on. Great, you set a due date for next Friday. And then next Friday comes, you realize I can't get it done. I can't do 3 days of work in one day. So therefore, you want to set a reminder to work on that ahead of time. But the second reason why we set reminders is because it helps us keep those important tasks on our top of our mind. Let me explain. Let me give you an example of how reminders are so effective. How many of you check your email this morning and you got some marketing email or some sales email and it's like their 5th follow-up? Why did they do that? The reason is the first email you'll ignore. The second one, you see that email and you're like, oh yeah, I think I heard that last time. By the 5th email, for some reason, it's top of mind, right? Because you're like, you keep on seeing this over and over again. So what happens is that when something is loud and something is recurring, it actually takes over our brain mental capacity. And therefore, when we have a recurring reminder, it's a way for us to also fight that same system. And so it makes these urgent tasks pop to the top. So what I like to do is I like to set recurring reminders on my most important tasks, actually. So here, for example, again, I have something that's due. I'm going to go ahead and down here in the message, I'll say, remind me daily. And again, Part Matrix uses natural language. It takes this text that I type in the conversation here, and it'll convert it into the reminders for me. And as you can see, our UI automatically updated. It'll remind me in 24 hours, and it'll remind me daily until I get this task done. And that's the power of the reminder system. So when you work on Matrix, I highly recommend that you use these two features. And so when we talk about 20% of the features that give 80% of the value, this is it. Okay, so now on the right-hand side, I have a couple other things I can do. I can chat, as you can see here. Now, if you're using it for personal priorities, the chat doesn't do much. Obviously, it's just a way to communicate with other people. But the chat still provide a history for you. So this is where you can type in notes to yourself around this task, and it tracks it as part of your record. So for me personally, I actually use the chat as a way to sort of keep myself in sync and track my thoughts over time. So, for example, when I have something that's really important, it's never static, right? So it's something that's very important and I'm thinking about it. And then later on, I think of something new. I would just keep on adding that message to the chat. And the reason why that's more helpful than just using the note system is that it gives me a timestamp. So I think about that today, then tomorrow I might think about something else and so forth. So that's one thing I recommend that you do with the chat system. And again, of course, the natural language is pretty helpful. But also, when you delegate this task to a future collaborator, guess what? They get to see the full chat history. So that's a very convenient way to ensure that the context of everything you've ever thought about is there for somebody else to see. Now, of course, you have the note system, but this is where you can create subtasks or basic notes around the task. And then also in the resources section is where you can attach files, documents, links, and so forth. So Matrix is actually an extremely flexible system. And so what I mean by that is that it's almost like a fractal. So what that means is a task may have its own matrix. So what that allows you to do is you can have a matrix of matrices. And what that boils down to is that at the executive level, maybe you have a set of priorities, but within that priority, you can actually expand it further and so forth. So that's what the resources section is for. It's a way for you to expand it, but also you can attach additional information as long as it's relevant. Okay, let's go back to the quadrants, because that's the most important part. So I've created this task in quadrant 4. I can actually just drag it to quadrant 1. So now it's high priority. So from my perspective, when I start my day, I'm like, you know what? I got to work on this task because it's due tomorrow. It's in high priority. It's something I got to get done. Now, what happens though is that, how do you decide how many projects you should have and what type of projects you should have? As you see here on the left-hand side, I have whatever, a few dozen projects here, my personal priorities, my goals for 2025, my weekly staff meeting, and so forth. So in my actual work account, I have more than 300 projects. Doesn't mean all of you will get that number of projects one day, but still, I want you to tell you that don't be afraid to create more projects. Projects serves as context, right? Because if you start mixing things up, it gets a little bit noisy. So for example, your personal priorities might be very different from the priorities that you have for various initiatives that you're working on, or the stuff you have for family things, and so forth. So that's when you decide, okay, this is when I should create a different projects, because within each project you have the quadrants. Now, I want to show you a couple of things. We'll go ahead and select a project here that has more tasks. As you can see, from when you look at this quadrant, you can see a lot of different tasks across the different uh, icons and so forth. So how do you deal with all this information and look at it from all the different perspectives? At the very top here, I have the matrix as the primary view, but I can also change views to what's called the list view. Now, this is something that a lot of people are much more familiar with, because this is where you can see all the tasks that you have in one list, when they were created, when they're due, when they're modified, and so forth. What's nice about this view is that it's very easy to sort. So when I have a lot of tasks within a particular matrix, I like to go to the list view when I need to find what things are overdue. Because when they're overdue, they show up right here and I can just sort it and they turn red. So you see how easy it is for me to spot the things that are overdue. And of course, I can also filter them by quadrants as well. And then not only that, I can search this list and say, you know what, show me the list view, but only for the high priority tasks that I have, right? And so now, again, I can sort it and so forth, but it's focus, hone in on exactly what I really care about. So I'll go ahead and undo the filter. And then I have the next view, which is called the Kanban view. This is actually a really nice way for you to see tasks that you have to do, the tasks that are in progress, and the tasks that are done. So as you use Protomatrix more, those 15 things that we have to do, for example, they start in the to-do section. As you work on them, you can actually drag them over to progress or done. So for example, I'll go ahead and drag this over to done. Now that task is complete. And so this is one simple way for me to see what's on my plate. Now, this view is actually good for project managers. And so the reason is project managers tend to have a list of things they need to get done, right? You have a project that has a start and an end, and you're going through the checklist. Now, with Protomatrix, I think there are three types of projects. The first is what's called the transient project, which is one that has a start date and an end date. When you're working on a construction site and a construction project over the course of 18 months, you have all these tasks that you have at the beginning and at the very end of it. Hopefully you're done with all of that, right? And so that's the burn down diagram shows that you go from 15 to 0. But then you might have projects that are persistent. So for us at our company, we have projects for every single one of our platforms. So Microsoft Teams, Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and so forth. So unfortunately, those projects last forever because we're coming up with new features, new implementations, or things, new bugs that we have to fix. So that project will last forever and it keeps on adding on and on and on. So those are the two major types of projects. But the third type of projects is actually recurring projects or templates. So as an example, maybe you have a customer onboarding process. When you bring on a customer, you have to do the things that, the 25 things starting from day 1 to day 30 and so forth. Protomatrix allows you to actually create a project, set a start date, and everything will actually get created for you automatically. And you go back to a clean slate of all the to-dos, all the things in progress, and done. And then I have the calendar view, which is very straightforward. Most of us are very familiar with calendars. And we plan our days around that. With Protomatrix, you have a calendar on a per project basis as well. Now, one thing that's really neat about our calendar view is that you can combine it with filters. And then instead of seeing all the tasks you have to do across all your quadrants, you go to here and you just select the things that are in quadrant 1. So now suddenly, as you can see, you have a place for you to track all the things you could do, and you can see the calendar for that. But then you switch it and say, you know what? Don't show me the calendar of all the things I could do. Show me the calendar for the things I should do. And so that's what you change it to quadrant 1. And that's exactly when you do that. So for me personally, this is something that I toggle back and forth all the time. And it just gives me a way to focus as needed, but then step back and look at the big picture when needed to. And then, of course, I have the Gantt chart view. And again, the Gantt chart view is different from calendar for one reason. The calendar is good for you to see tasks that are due today or this week or this month. But the Gantt chart view gives you a perspective across years and quarters. And so when I zoom out here, as you can see, I can actually, see all the way through January and then zoom out further to 2027, 2028, and so forth. And again, the filter section allows me to find the information that I need across all of my all of the tasks that I have to do. So I'll go ahead and clear this filter here. So when I talk about Protomatrix, as you can see, the matrix is one way for us to capture the tasks that we have and prioritize it. But then Protomatrix provides you all these other perspectives, these other views on top of the data. So then you can focus on those most important tasks, but then look at your calendar, look at your timeline, look at your Kanban chart, and so forth. Okay, now let's talk about how to create projects, since I've mentioned that you shouldn't be scared of creating projects. If you click on projects here, you can go and choose create project. When you go to that view, you have several options. The first is, of course, you can always create a blank project. Literally go and type in your project name, notes if needed. You can associate with the user group. So for example, maybe it's a marketing project, so associate with a marketing group and so forth. And then you can choose from a few basic templates that we have here. If you leave at basic Protomatrix, that's an Eisenhower matrix, and then you can change the color. The color doesn't actually affect functionality, but it's a good visual cue. So maybe you have all the engineering projects is one color, all the marketing projects another color, and so forth, or a color for your personal projects, right? So that's what the colors are useful for. So you can create a project from a blank slate. The second is you can actually go to public templates. So we have created more than 1,000 free public templates for you guys to use. And what it does is it actually takes the same quadrants, but it renames them. And so it's actually a very simple concept. But what happens is that when we look at the dimensions of important urgency, that's one perspective. But maybe you look at the dimensions of impact and effort, right? What task is low impact but high effort? And so as you can imagine, anything that's sort of like two-dimensional can be used inside the Parametric software. And again, it's just a way for us to bucketize all these tasks that we have and to give us a higher dimension than a list. And so I recommend that you try some of these other dimensions and these other perspectives, these other templates, mostly because our brain is so good at seeing things in various ways and through different perspective that by using the Eisenhower Matrix as a starting point, but then adapting the quadrant names and so forth to the way that you work is the single most important thing. So you have the public templates. 30, 60, 90 day is a great one for managers because then it allows you to plan every single quarter. And then what happens though is that as you use Matrix, you can actually build your own templates. And when you do that, you can go to My Templates and you can choose a template that you've created, or this is shared across your entire organization. So as an example, I can actually choose an employee onboarding template. And when I do that, I can set a start date, and Matrix will actually build out the entire matrix with all the tasks in it set to the start date that you've created. We also have an AI system that will create the project for you. So what that means is, let's say you want to be promoted this year. You type in get promoted to a senior project manager role, and you click next, and Matrix will generate the task as a suggestion of the things that you can do to fulfill your goals. Now, it's never going to be perfect, but it's a good starting point. It's a great brainstorming tool. And then finally, you have the import from CSV. So Matrix actually integrate very, very nicely with the Microsoft CSV and Excel system. So for those of you who have a lot of tasks you already have in an existing tool, or you already have in an Excel document, well, guess what? You can click on import from CSV and Matrix will generate a project for you. And the format's actually very simple. So I'll show you a format here. For example, I have an Excel document here. All I need is actually the column name, and I can type in whatever task I want. I can do, due date, start date, etc. And if you have that in here, you import into Matrix, it'll create the entire project for you from this particular CSV. Likewise, you can export your entire project to CSV as well. So that's how you create projects. So my suggestion to you is, one, create a project for your personal goals. And then the second thing I want you to create is a project for your team. So I'll show you how that works. So go ahead and create a project called your weekly staff meeting. So if you're a manager, this is something that I think is extremely important. Once you create the project, weekly staff meeting, you go to the right-hand side. This is now your project details. In your project details, you can actually click on members and invite people to your project. So what this does is it essentially shares this project across that team. Now, if you're in a team and you're in a project, you get to see all the tasks within that project. And the reason is simple. It helps everyone be on the same page. So when you have your staff meeting, my suggestion is this: simply project this project onto your screen, right? If you're in the same room, you have a projector, put on the big screen. If you're in a Teams meeting or a Slack meeting or whatever, you just share it on your screen. And here's the reason why. What happens is that when we go around the room and we talk about our priorities or our updates for the week, a lot of people end up talking about the things that's top of mind. They'll say something like, oh yeah, this morning I got so-and-so update, or yesterday this so-and-so thing happened. And the reason is it's because it's recent, right? So we have this recency bias that affect all of us. And guess what? The things that's really, really important, the task that like everyone was supposed to be thinking about or working on, but if it hasn't been updated for 2 weeks, it's so low down your list, you might not even get to it. So instead, by using Party Matrix as part of your weekly meeting, what you do is you ensure that everyone is still aware of the tasks that are important. So I strongly recommend when you project this on the screen, you make sure that the appropriate people are talking about the task that's in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2 and not anywhere else, right? If you're talking about something else, then maybe it should belong higher up. Then just drag it over to quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. So it's a very useful way to catch yourself. that you're actually spending time and effort on the things that matter. And it's okay for Matrix to be wrong. You just update it. That's the key. So then afterwards, when everyone goes back to their desk, guess what? You're on the same page because everyone can go into the weekly staff meeting and you've agreed on the priorities as you've set during the team meeting. That's the magic, right? And that's what I said earlier around how it's so important to make these priorities explicit and tangible and concrete, as opposed to everyone thinking that they know what the priorities are. And when they go back to their seats, they're working on something that's in quadrant 4 and it makes no sense whatsoever. So I strongly recommend this particular workflow. I think it's really, really helpful. And the Eisenhower Matrix is very beneficial for that purpose. So one of the things that we talk about is how do you assign tasks to people then, right? So then they know what they're responsible for. So I'll go ahead and give you some example. I'll go ahead and say task 1, due in 1 week, task 2, task 3, and so forth. As you can see, next to, in a team project, next to every single task, there's sort of an avatar here. And so this is your initial, if you don't have a picture, but you can also upload a picture so then you can actually see, what the person's face is, for example. But what you can do is you can click on that and now you can assign to another person. So now you can see how various folks are in charge of different tasks. And so when you look at the party matrix, it's very easy to see what it is that they're working on. And again, what you can do is you go back to filter, and then you can go and actually say, show me only the task assigned to a specific person, right? And so party matrix gives you all these ways to sort of combine filters together to surface up only the information that's relevant. So then you can focus at any specific point in time. So definitely leverage the filter system. I use that a lot, mostly because I have tens of thousands of tasks. Therefore, I can't go and look at everything. But Matrix filter system gives me that complete perspective. And now I can go ahead and close my filters. You can see all the tasks that I have. Now, one thing that Matrix can do is actually, as I mentioned to you earlier, create a project from a task, because a task itself may be its own project, right? Maybe it may deserve its own matrix. So what you can do is you can simply right click on a task and choose convert to project. And then what happens is you click convert, and now Matrix will create an entire matrix from that task. But the neat part is this. So I'll go ahead and task 1 and new project. The neat part is that Party Matrix will actually inherit the information from this project, from this matrix, and bring it back to this particular initial matrix for you. So in your weekly staff meeting, essentially you can convert each of those tasks into its own matrices. And as you can see now, instead of just showing the task information, it'll show a picture of the entire matrix, the number of tasks in every single quadrant. And then also, if you have anything that's overdue, you can see how obvious right here. You can see that there's 10 tasks that's overdue within this particular sub project. I can click on this go-to project. I can actually see exactly what are the things that's overdue, and you could redelegate this or change the due dates and so forth. So this is the primary reason why you'd use something like Matrix over a piece of paper. I mentioned to you how you could use a piece of paper to track your priorities. The only difference with Matrix is that we can actually go and take that same quadrant and then actually help you propagate it down or propagate it up. And so that allows you to have a better sense of what are my priorities within my priorities. So that's how you create projects in Matrix. That's how you create tasks. That's how you delegate tasks and so forth. One thing that you can do too is actually you can right click on a project and there's a lot of things you can do with it. For example, you can import, export, duplicate projects. You can restrict a project. So restricting means it's a way for people to be in control of the project to make sure that you don't delegate a task to someone else by accident. It's pretty useful as you expand usage of Matrix because maybe you're in HR and you have HR tasks that cannot be seen by others, right? And you don't want someone to accidentally delegate that task to another person. So that's when you restrict the project. Now, I've talked about how I can actually filter within a project, but if you start using Matrix a lot, you're not going to have 3 projects. You might have dozens of projects. So how do you know what to work on at any point in time? Well, at the very top here, there's a couple of things that pop up. The first is new assignments. So when I delegate a task to another person, guess what? They will get this bar right here, and it says new assignments, and it says there's a task that's assigned to them. They can click on this task and work on it and update it as needed. Also, I might want to mention somebody. So how does that work? Mention is a way for you to um, get someone's attention without delegating that task to them. And the scenario is actually pretty straightforward. So I'll show you how that works. Imagine here, I go back to my staff meeting, I select a task, and I assign this to Eugenia. But what if I actually want to make sure that her manager is aware of this? So down here on the bottom left, I click on the plus, I mention her manager. So now suddenly I need you to take a look at this. So now her manager does not get the delegation, but instead is mentioned in that task. So those are sort of the different ways in which you can use assignments and mention. But also I have what's called the agenda. So as you can see here, it says today one. If I click on that, it opens the Matrix agenda view that shows me the tasks I have to do today, tomorrow, and then the things that are overdue. And so I can click directly on those tasks. I can see exactly what it is I have to work on. And so this is a very useful view for people who are individual contributors. So all you're really trying to do as an individual contributor is just decide what to work on, right? And so the agenda view tells you the things with the due dates where it requires your attention that you need to work on. So that's how you should figure out what to work on at any point in time in Matrix. And that's why you set due dates, because due dates essentially helps us map it out from a priority perspective, something that's important, but then also when you should work on it, because then it'll show up on your agenda at the appropriate time. Now, if you're a manager, one thing you can do with Matrix is actually look at the agenda, not just for your task, but for the tasks you delegate to others. So on the top right here, there's a little icon. You click on that and you choose items I own. Again, if you're an individual contributor, that's what you want to see. But if you're a manager, you want to choose items I follow. So now it lets you see the tasks that are assigned to you, but also the tasks that are assigned to other people within your team. So that helps you plan out the agenda for the rest of the people that you work with. Now, if you use Matrix a lot, one of the things that happens is you might have tasks delegated across so many different projects. And so we have what's called the one-on-one view. This is a very unique feature to Matrix, and it flips the whole thing around. Because when we think about the things we have to do, usually, we can think of projects, but also what do I have to do for a certain person? So if you're a manager, you can go to the one-on-one view, select any of the people that you work with, and guess what? Matrix will show you all the tasks that you have in common with that person, all the things you've delegated that person across all of your projects. It's one central view that gives you a complete perspective from a people-centric view. Now, this is very useful when you have your one-on-one meeting. When you do your one-on-one calls with your team member, instead of saying, hey, what is it you're working on? What's blocking you and all that? You open up the one-on-one and now you see all the tasks across all projects. And when you need to create new tasks, you can add right here. When you need to reprioritize tasks, you can just select the task, change the due dates, right, as needed. And you can sort by priorities, you can filter by priorities, you can sort by due dates, and so forth. But one thing that's really useful about this too is imagine if one of your employees has a lot of work on their plate. Well, guess what? You can go to multi-select. You start selecting the items and say, you know what? I know you got on your plate, a lot on your plate here. Why don't I take these 4 tasks and I'm going to go ahead and edit it and go and assign it to another person. And just like that, what I've just done is I don't have to go to a project. I don't have to find a person. I don't have to manually update every single task. Matrix gives me one centralized management system where I can actually see everything from a per person basis. Very, very powerful. It is unbelievably useful when you're managing a team because you know exactly what everyone's working on. And then not only that, if I go to filter, I can group by projects, and now suddenly I can see the actual task within every single project too. Again, I never click on individual projects to find all the tasks. It takes way too much work, right? Especially you have a lot of things you're working on at any point in time. Instead, I can focus because I can use Matrix to drill down precisely on what it is I need to work on. So that's a one-on-one view. But guess what? Matrix has the calendar view, and this calendar view is what's called the global calendar view. You saw the calendar view on a per project basis, but if I go to calendar here, I can actually grab the calendar across multiple projects simultaneously. So what that means is I can see not just the calendar for one project at a time, I can see the calendar for everything, but I can click on filters again and say, you know what, show me the calendar only for my important urgent task. And then not only that, show me the calendar for only tasks assigned to myself or assigned to my employees or my direct reports or whoever it is that I work with on a routine basis. So Matrix will generate the calendar based on the combination of all these rules that you've created. And again, this is why using the quadrant system is so useful, because you can go to the calendar, find the things you have to do that are important and urgent across all your projects, and it's in one centralized place. And then, of course, you have the search view. The search view lets you search through everything. You can search through all your items across across all of your matrix. But there's one thing here that I want to share with you because this is very useful, which is how do you find out what are all the things that you've worked on over the certain time span? And the reason is the following. Performance reviews coming up. You're supposed to, document the stuff that you've worked on, and you've touched 1,000 things. And a lot of people don't do a good job of giving themselves credits. I know so many people where they've done 1,000 things, and then when it comes to their performance reviews, they can't come up with anything. They come up with like 5 things. I've done only these 5 things over the past quarter. Clearly, that's wrong. So instead, if you just track your work in Matrix, you go to the search view, click on filters, find out all the things that you finish, and then you can actually choose even a time period, or you can choose specific projects. And now you have the list of things that you finished because you filter to yourself. And now you have these 3 things. You go here, you select all, and guess what you can do? Click on this drop down and then choose share, and then choose email items. And what happens is Matrix will generate a whole email report for you that you can copy and paste into your work management system for your performance review. Extremely powerful. You don't have to go through every single project and dig things out. You go to the global search view, change the filters to your work, the things that you've accomplished, and Matrix will do the rest. Extremely useful in my opinion, for that, but also during the course of the year. You don't have to wait until the end of the quarter, right? You don't have to wait until the end of a month or to review all this. And then also from a manager perspective, you can see what everyone else is working on. What are the things that's on their plate? What are the things they're accomplishing? Or what are the things that's behind schedule across all projects? And then down here, I have the Gantt chart. Again, it gives me a complete perspective, but now it's across longer term horizon. Now, one of the things I didn't talk about yet is email management. And here we've talked about task and so forth, but one of the biggest reasons why a customer comes to Matrix is prioritizing emails. If you're like me, you get a lot of emails. And if you're like me, a lot of those emails are not that important. And so when I get an email, and an email that's important, what do you do? Like, imagine if you can't respond to it right now. What do you do? A lot of people mark it as unread. A lot of people flag it. If you have 5 flag emails, great. You can get to those real quick. If you have 50 flag emails, suddenly it's not so easy anymore, right? It boils down to that same problem we had earlier. Everything's important and nothing is important. Everything is flagged, then nothing is flagged. So with Matrix, what I can do is in Outlook here, I can install the Matrix for Outlook. And if you go to apps here, you can choose Matrix. Now we have a couple of different solutions. So what you want to search for is turn email into tasks, the blue one here. And if I click on that, I can choose prioritize email. And what this does is it lets me turn any email into a task in Matrix. But the magic is I can choose what project it goes in, and I can choose what quadrant it goes in, and I can choose a due date, and I can even assign it to another person. So directly from Outlook, I'm able to prioritize an email, set a due date, delegate it, and without having to go and forward the email and then hoping that my team member would know what it is that they're working on and that it's a high priority task for them. Extremely extremely powerful, especially for those critical emails. And so, as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to go and prioritize all your emails, right? You know, that part of matrix, then you're just overwhelming yourself in part of matrix too. Instead, use this to capture those really critical emails that you want to make sure that you get to at the end of the day. And then also what you can do is actually imagine if you get an email and it's already, you already have a task for it. Well, Matrix lets you attach the email to an existing task. And so instead of actually prioritizing email, you open Matrix, and what it does is it lets you search for any of your tasks here and then simply hover over that task and attach. This allows you to take multiple emails and attach it to a single task, and it all goes into that resources section that we talked about earlier. Very, very useful. Now, if you are like me and you also look at your emails on the phone a lot, and so for me, I actually use Apple Mail on my iPhone, so I don't use Outlook. So Party Matrix has what's called an inbox. So if you go back to Party Matrix, click on inbox, all of you have a secret inbox address. If you click on here, you get a special email address. Save this as a contact on your phone. So I save it as inbox per matrix. So what happens is when I'm on the phone and I open an email, again, I don't flag it, I don't mark it as unread, I forward it to my inbox, and Party Matrix will go and create a task from that email. But the neat part is when I forward it, I can say in the body, due tomorrow, 2 p.m., remind me daily, and make those separate lines, and Matrix will automatically set the due dates for my forwarded email, as well as remind me to make sure that I get that email answered. So that's a very useful way to prioritize an email. And then if you happen to use Microsoft Teams, you get the entire Matrix experience within Teams itself. So you can actually click on apps, add Matrix here, make sure you pin it on the left-hand side. And then one neat feature in Matrix is the ability for you to actually attach the one-on-one view to your direct reports. So if you have a coworker, simply click on this plus right here, choose Matrix, choose the one-on-one view, and guess what? You can actually get that whole one-on-one view that I showed you earlier within Microsoft Teams, within the chat of every single person that you talk to on a routine basis. So you don't even have to go to Party Matrix to create tasks. When you need to delegate them something, you click on Add Share Task here. It automatically assign it to them, automatically adds you as a follower. You can choose what project it goes in. You can set the due dates using that natural language that we talked about. So if you're a manager, this is, I think, tremendously helpful because you should add the one-on-one for each of the people that you work with. And then also, if you use Party Matrix and you find that you're chatting a lot in Teams, you can actually hover over any conversation that you have in Teams and then choose Create PM Item, which allows you to convert any conversation that you're having right now into a task in Party Matrix. So this is our integration in Teams. Actually, there's so much more in terms of capabilities that, if you're actually using Party Matrix, you can explore. But we're probably the most integrated system inside Microsoft Teams. And then also, we're the only system that works in Outlook and Edge. And also, we can pull in planner data, your to-do data, and all of those things. So but the point is that's not that important, right? Let's circle back and let me go back to the presentation and let's wrap this up. Here are some tips to shortcut your success. One, if you're a manager, create a project for your team staff meeting and screen share it. Two, if you're managing multiple sites, create a project for each of those sites or location. And then that dashboard project to oversee it all. Remember, I told you how you can convert a task into a project. You can actually do that. And so that allows you to have one central project to see everything. And then if you have a lot of repetitive tasks, make sure you create a project or a template for that. And then if you're a business owner, create a project for each of your departments. And then lastly, for everyone, I recommend that you create a project to track your goals. And either it's personal goals or, promotion requests or whatever it is. It's just so important for us to have a centralized place to capture all the things we could do so then we can truly know what we should do, right? If you don't write it down, if it's not tangible, if it's not concrete, we're going to forget it. But also remember, you focus on the things that are actually important. Again, don't write down, I need to check my email. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't help you if you have to do that regardless. So write down the things where you could make a choice for. And then when it boils down to the 80-20 rule, remember the things that I mentioned to you. One, make sure you set the due dates, make sure you set those reminders for your most critical tasks. Then make sure when you create a project for your team, you invite the appropriate people, and then you also delegate them the tasks that they need to work on, and then just project that on the screen. So what you to do now, so one, sign up for Matrix and use it in Teams and Outlook if you use Teams and Outlook. Otherwise, you can actually get our desktop app. So Matrix works on every platform, iOS, Android. We have native desktop app for Windows, for Mac, and then again, of course, the apps inside Teams, Outlook. We have integration in Gmail. We have integration in Chrome, in Microsoft Edge, in Safari. So it's all there. And the simple reason is that if it's there, then it helps you access those tasks without switching context. So that's actually very, very useful. And then create a project to highlight your top priorities. Remember, you got to do that. You got to do that today, right? Just write down the stuff you have to work on, and then over the next week or so, start updating them, start sharing them with your coworkers. Make sure you set up due dates and reminders. Ask your colleagues to do the same. That's the one thing that will give you value right away. Just ask everyone to create their own Eisenhower matrix, track the tasks they have, and just compare notes. And if you don't use our software, I'm okay with that. But if you do that single exercise this week, I think you're going to find some value almost immediately. And again, if you agree on 90% of the stuff, that doesn't really matter. You're looking for that disagreement with your team members. And if you do that, then you know that this particular exercise has been fruitful. Because the worst thing that can happen for all of us is we end up working on the things that don't matter, right? I mean, I've gone down those rabbit holes working on, so hard on something that is not impactful. And then likewise, the things that are really, really important, if we don't work on them, when will they ever get done? And so just this simple exercise will bring us to that alignment. And then set an hour each week to update your party matrix. I mean, it's as simple as that. You don't have to use party matrix every single day. I do, but you don't have to. You can just use it as a way to track your critical priorities. And so update it at the beginning of the week or the end of the week, so then you're on the same page. Make sure, you do that, especially for your team meetings, because then that ensures that everyone is sort of in sync. And then sit down every single week and compare notes with your coworkers. Very, very simple. You don't have to do much. Just use those few features that I talked about. All right. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions in the chat. Otherwise, you can always reach out to me at hi@affluence.com. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for your time. Okay, I see a couple questions. So the question is there a free version of the app? Yes. So actually, there's a free version of Matrix. You can have up to 5 projects, 100 open tasks, 250 total items, 5 collaborators. When you sign up for Matrix, you're automatically on the free tier. So you can actually use it. It's very, very straightforward. And so only when you actually need the full paid features that you should upgrade. I can't get the email function to work on my end. So are you referring to the Outlook app? So if you go back to Outlook, what happens is that you have to go, let me see if I can open my Outlook app here. So you go back to Outlook, there's a couple of things. The first, the inbox should always work, right? So if you copy that inbox address that I mentioned here, that should always let you prioritize your task because you're just sending an email. Very, very straightforward. Now, inside Outlook, you got to make sure that you install the right extension. So click on Add Apps and then search for Matrix, turn emails into tasks. I mean, our particular extension here has been featured by Microsoft as an editor choice app for like 6 years straight. So it should be very easy to find. It's also Microsoft 365 certified. So that means your IT should probably approve it already. If not, you can ask them. But all you have to do is install that. And when you do, and you click on that extension, then you choose prioritize email. So if you still have technical problems around that, just reach out to us to helpdesk@affluence.com, and we'd be happy to help. Someone asked about the HIPAA version. Is there a way to create task templates for recurring tasks instead of filling out new tasks every month, similar to project template? That's a great question. So in terms of project templates, let me show you. I think you probably saw this here. So you go to here and you click on a project. Once you click on a project at the top right, you can convert it into a template. And so what that does is it actually copies all the tasks within that project so then you can clone it. Now, there's no way for you to take a task and create a clone of it. I mean, you could right click on it, and what you could do is you could duplicate the task. But the other thing you could do is you could set a recurring due date. So for example, you could say, this task is due at the first of every month, as an example. And then when you mark that task as done, a new task is created for you automatically. So that would be the closest in terms of like the recurring task. How could I add emails with attachment in one step? So what happens is that if you go back to Outlook here, and then you go to apps and you choose Matrix and you choose open Matrix, what you can do is you can go to the gear icon here and then choose settings and then make sure that you have these things on right here. So you attach the original message to the item. Now the attachment inside the email is attached as part of the EML file. So what happens, the attachment doesn't get attached separately in Matrix. Instead, the whole email is attached as an EML file in Matrix. And then from there, you open that email file, then you see the attachment. Yes, the recording, you'll get the recording after we process it. So you said you added the app but can't turn email into task. Do you see, so this, again, this is something that you can reach out to our help desk and we'd be happy to help you. But the thing to check here is, do you see this option? And when you click on it, do you see these two? So that allows you to open Matrix or prioritize the email. Great question. Can I ask a column to the Kanban view? The answer is no. It's actually, it's kind of interesting. It's a good question, and it's funny because we've had customers reach out and say, "Can I add more quadrants?" Uh, as opposed to 4. And of course, the answer from that has also been no, mostly because sort of the concept of quadrants is 4. Now, in terms of the Kanban view, what happened is that this was meant more to track progress as opposed to like a Kanban board. So this is not a true Kanban board where you can have, board 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sort of like Trello in some ways. So we don't have that in our timeline at this moment. But it's a great question. So from that perspective, we don't. It is constrained within this particular framework. Great question. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you all for your time. Please feel free to reach out to me at hi@affluence.com if you have any feedback or questions, and I'd be happy to address those. Thank you all.